and immediate response. The utility is governed by the City Council acting as the Stillwater Utilities Authority. And so they have complete control over the electric system. That means they set performance standards, they set the service rules, and they ensure accountability. Also, from a local perspective, we provide in excess of 60 jobs. They are all our neighbors and friends. They all live within our community or around our community, and so they have a vested interest. The thing that makes us a premier electric utility is our commitment to our customers, to always do what's in the best interest of the customers, to try and understand what our customers' needs are and be able to meet those needs in a proactive way, and doing it in a cost-effective manner.
Still making long drives to Oklahoma City or Tulsa just for the airport? Stay close to home and fly with Stillwater Regional Airport. Daily nonstop flights to DFW with 800 plus flight connections in 29 countries.
Make sure that your car is away from any obstacles, mailboxes, basketball goals, or cars. The arm is very unforgiving and it can damage anything that it is reached around. Routes start at 6 a.m. and we could be at anywhere at any point of the route at 6 o'clock. So we advise all customers to make sure their cars are out by 6 a.m. Any trash day that is assigned to you, whether it be Monday through Friday, we will be there even on the holidays.
Whether you're shopping, dining, or doing business in Stillwater, we'd like to take the opportunity to let you know about public parking in 3 areas around Stillwater: downtown Stillwater, Campus Corner, and the Strip on Washington Street. In these areas, many of the free parking spots, mostly in the streets, are timed. Times range from 30 minutes to 3 hours, Monday through Friday, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. These spaces are not timed on weekends and city-recognized holidays. The purpose for these timed parking spots is to give everyone equal opportunity to a parking space, which is not only good for people visiting these areas, but is a benefit to the businesses in these areas as well. Now, say for instance you're cited for overtime parking while you're in a business. Instead of paying the $20 citation, you can bring it back to one of the more than 200 businesses in these 3 areas to have the ticket validated. All you have to do is give them the ticket, and that's it. They'll take care of the rest. For more information about the Public Parking Space Validation Program or tickets, call the Municipal Court at the City of Stillwater, 405-742-8255, or go to stillwater.org.
Hi Stillwater, my name is Rob Hill and I'm the Emergency Management Director for the City of Stillwater. When a natural disaster occurs that causes structural damage to your home, shutting some of your utilities off may help keep you and your family safe and may prevent further damage to your home. In an event that you need to do this, the City of Stillwater wants you to know why it would be good to shut a utility service off, as well as how to do it and when the best time is to shut it off.
Good evening. Welcome to the January 28th meeting of the Stillwater City Council. This is our monthly study session this evening. I will go ahead and call this meeting to order. And all we have on the agenda tonight is general orders to discuss civic engagement, strategic planning, strategic budget plan, and our public-private partnership review procedures. So I will turn it over to Mr. McNichol to give us a little introduction here.
Well, Mayor and Council, you have before you a draft plan prepared by staff. And I want to emphasize the word draft. It is your plan. This is what we use throughout the year and tie it back to the budget to give us priorities on our budget planning and the council's goals for the coming year. We're not asking you to make any decisions tonight, but we are asking for your input. And there are several people in the audience taking notes. And we will reduce that to eventually a finished plan or a proposed plan for you to look at the same time we bring you a budget. So these two things are really tied at the hip. And again, it's what we go through in preparing our budget for the year. So this is your time to discuss and tell us what you'd like to see.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So this draft plan is based, well, it's an update of the plans that we've adopted in the past, correct?
Yes, sir.
And a couple of I guess the first item on the agenda is sort of the civic engagement piece, which is here somewhat at the beginning where we talk about public input. I don't know if it would be possible maybe for Jerry or someone to talk to us a little bit about the new sort of updates. I know that's kind of putting you on the spot, but
It would.
just kind of give us a little rundown of some of the new stuff you guys have going over marketing on public input.
Hi, Sherry Fletcher, Director of Marketing and Public Relations. Based on the last year's strategic planning session, we listened and know that you wanted to have more civic engagement, more measurement, more outreach. So we spent the year trying to find tools that would fit what you were wanting to accomplish. So we've looked for some platforms that would work and that would mix in with some of the ones that we've already done. So one thing that we rolled out recently is FlashVote, and that is a polling software that allows us to get people to sign up to receive polls. So these would create scientifically sound data on topics that you're interested in. So we're hoping to have let's see, I think I just checked it. We're at almost 450 people signed up so far. For a city this size, we need about 700 people to do an initial poll. So we're getting really close. Mm-hmm. So we've been pushing that out. So at that point, you'd be able to say some issue or some topic you would like to know, kind of what the citizens are thinking. Then we can initiate a poll. The company would push out the poll. They would gather back the data and be able to give you really good data on what people are thinking on that. So that's one thing we rolled out. Another thing, on our citizen satisfaction survey last year or the year before that, I can't remember now, one of the things that we got really low marks on was people understanding the budget. So this year we got another software platform, and it's called Balancing Act. And so we went through, put in the budget, last year's budget into this web-based program. So people can actually go in there, learn about the budget, kind of rearrange the numbers to match what they think the city should spend on different items, and then try to balance it. And it's actually really hard to balance. And so,
We know.
yeah, a lot of people actually don't even finish it. They move the numbers around and say, well, that's how I would like to have it. But on the back end, we can gather up all of that feedback, and we'll be able to present that to you. So you can know, maybe they think police needs a little more money, or they want more money in parks, and you'd actually be able to see what they're looking at. Another thing kind of tied to that is taxpayer receipt. On that one, what you can do is you can estimate how much you think you pay in sales tax, put that number into the software, and it will tell you paid $50 for police, you paid $25 for park, so you can actually see where your money's going. Let's see, what else? We also rolled out a podcast. While not exactly civic engagement, but it does allow us to quickly, we can bring a staff member in, council in, or if there's a particular topic, we can record a conversation fairly quickly, get it on, and release it, within minutes, quite honestly. And then people can come in, listen to it, whether they're walking or, so all of the different places you could listen to podcast, you can find our podcast as well.
Excellent. Pop-up City Hall.
Oh, yes, the other one. Yes, we do. What we've done is we've taken the counselor's office hours and we've kind of made it a little more mobile so that whenever we go out to places where people are already gathering, we can kind of set up a kind of a display, if you will. And we bought this bright blue and white umbrella so we can pop that up so that people can see it. We've got an A-frame out. We actually had it out today for people to sign up for Flash Vote so that it's a little more visible and that we're in places where people already are. And while we're there, we'd be able to sign people up for Flash Vote. We would also be able to do some random quick surveys, find out what people are thinking on specific topics. We can like if we get a really good question, we can automatically do a Facebook Live and record it. So it gives us a little more flexibility. Or we can scale it up as large or scale it down as small as we need to. So it's just a real flexible tool.
Excellent. Thank you for the overview. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
I would also, Mayor, tell you that Melissa Reams and I spoke to the young professionals last week about the budget, and we're happy to talk to any civic group or any individual that wants to come in and visit about the budget and budget procedures.
Do you guys have any more of those planned, other civic groups that you've got on the schedule yet?
Not that I'm aware of unless they've contacted for Patrick's Night's meeting.
Okay. So if somebody in town wants to schedule them to come out to a civic group, they should get in touch with you, Sherry?
On the website is a place for that.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So go to the website and request the city manager and CFO to come tell you about the budget. Those are good presentations, honestly. It's very effective and helpful to sort of see the big picture. Okay, so this civic engagement piece is part of Strategic Priority 6 in the strategic plan, civic engagement, to encourage participation and understanding of government through outreach and inclusiveness initiatives that inspire trust and confidence in the local government. Certainly, I think we've made a lot of good strides this year in some of these new initiatives and trying to get some of this stuff in place. Councilors, if there's additional comments you have or thoughts that we could do more or ideas for additional objectives or strategies with the civic engagement piece?
Civic engagement is an interesting term. I think immediately of citizens, and it's also businesses and other people that we operate with, how we engage with everyone. Civic engagement and how we engage with even other large entities in the city. I do like the things that the marketing people, Sherry, has developed. I think I'm anxious for something that gets us out ahead of issues before they become issues. We've talked several times about how do we change the culture? How how do we make sure that anything that we do is not a surprise? How do we prepare even our own selves to be thinking ahead about the information that people need to know way ahead of time, kind of plowing the ground almost before we spring things on them and on ourselves. And I don't know if that comes from marketing area, public information office, whatever you would like to call that type of information. I don't know if it's even, I don't know how it's possible, but am I making any sense?
Sure. It kind of reminds me of like the idea of our agenda planner, where we kind of can see out ahead the next few meetings in terms of the issues that we're going to be dealing with. I don't know if that's something that, from a public perspective, because marketing has been doing a good job about, I've seen those social media posts, what's coming up this week at City Council and kind of what's on the agenda and that sort of thing. Of course, the actual agenda is not usually set until Thursday or Friday, so you don't necessarily, there's not a ton of information that we can get out a lot sooner, but in terms of big issues that are sort of on our plate that coming up at future meetings kind of thing, that may be something that we could add in there to get ahead of some of those things.
I think this calls also for us as a city council to be able to have the conversation among ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
What do we want to do? I mean, what are our goals? We also kind of react week to week. How do we get ahead of our own selves?
Mm-hmm.
We've done different kinds of strategic planning as a council in previous years. Not necessarily related to the budget.
Okay.
More of a visioning kind of session, is
Right.
that?
I'm really trying to pull my own self out of being too involved in the day-to-day. I would like to pull us way out into more of a long-range thinking, which I think would help us try to prepare other people, city staff, citizens, other entities, to all get on board and work together.
I do think there's something to having kind of that forward, eye on the horizon. There's always that day-to-day. I always I kind of compare it to running a household, right? But you've got that day-to-day stuff, but you also have that kind of longer range vision that you have to have, that somebody should kind of be steering. I do think that's kind of our role as council, to be steering that ship and having the opportunity to do some of that visioning. Maybe there's opportunity in some of the more interactive tools and pop-ups to kind of start. Maybe we specifically plan for some of those conversations to be kind of big picture conversations, as opposed to this is what's happening tomorrow, or this is what happened last week and we're still working through that. Maybe we try to bring that conversation, kind of zoom it out a little bit with people. I love the pop-up city halls. I think that's such a great opportunity. It's so hard. We're all so busy to get people to engage with us, and I really do think bringing City Hall to them is probably the best opportunity. It's kind of a traditional tactic in community planning and community outreach to go where the people are, and so I love that very much. But I don't think that always has to be kind of a a little slice, maybe we take a bigger slice in those and try to have a bigger conversation, or bigger topic of conversation in those, maybe.
Yeah.
And I think the more we have people that engage with us and let us know how they're feeling, it kind of allows us also then to do a combination of being able to think forward, but then also have a pulse on what people are thinking, because it's fine for a council to do all this forward visioning, but if it's not really in sync with or even being communicated with the community, then it's hard to get everybody on board. So I think it lends itself to having both those things happen.
This ties in a little bit with our study session from a while back. I'm not sure if you were at the employment one where we talked about
I watched the video.
Yeah,
Yes.
so we talked about
I thought it was excellent.
a visioning position of some kind, or an innovation, strategic thinking, some kind of position within the city, assistant city manager kind of level, that would give us someone on staff who could help drive that, because I think you all will agree that it would be nice if we could step back out of the day-to-day, but we still need help from staff to be able to sort of
Right.
put some of this stuff together. We don't do this as a full-time job. So I don't know, Mr. McNichol, if you have update on kind of where we are with the idea of a strategic position within the city.
Yeah, you will have a draft on that either late this week or first of next.
On a job description?
Yes, and I want to make sure that we get those points in it that were discussed during that study session. So that's coming quickly and can be incorporated into this again by the end of budget time.
I think any planning or strategic plan, it should be just the beginning of a conversation, and a conversation with the staff and the administration, a conversation among our own selves. There's really nothing worse than just a printed booklet that is static for a year. I mean, I know you all follow it.
We do.
So I'll look forward to that job description.
Do you have in mind a different format for how this should look?
Yeah. Well, this is, it feels to me more like your presentation of the strategic plan. I mean, we picked the 6 priorities a number of years ago. This is very related to the budget.
Yeah.
It is, and as I said when we started, this is a draft. It's your plan. We're trying to give a starting point to look at. So if you would prefer to get someone to facilitate that kind of thing.
Well, I think, what the video that I watched of the other meeting that you had, I mean, that's kind of what I picture if we had more time to, drill down in with that type of
Facilitation.
information.
Yeah. And those are, maybe somewhat different tracks. I mean, we do need to be able to give staff kind of an overarching budget strategy plan so that they kind of, as they're planning budget, kind of know, here's the things that we're going to prioritize when it comes to getting into balancing act and going, okay, well, if we're going to spend more money here, we're going to have to spend less money here. And so having something like this that gives the staff a general outline of where we see the priorities being, but then that discussion, I think, is a little bit bigger picture, a little bit longer term, not as tied to specific expenditures for this coming year, and more about the direction, which I think that's a really good point.
This budget, this document is important to do. We have to do this. I'd like to see something bigger than this.
We're going to appoint you the subcommittee to make that happen.
Okay.
That's not on the agenda tonight, though, so we can't do that, right? Okay, well, let's just take a look at this larger sort of strategic plan in general, though, and see if there's additional comments or priorities that we'd like to change or move around or deal with at some level. So on page 13, the strategic priorities are listed: effective services and accountable government, inspired management, safe community, place and mobility, and quality of life are the first five before we got to civic engagement, which we've kind of already covered. Anyone have comments or questions or thoughts about big picture strategic priorities as listed here?
I liked the number 2. I liked inspired management.
So each of these have a number of objectives listed under them. I think usually 3 or 4. Inspired management includes the objectives to create an environment where decisions are made based on planning and foresight. I think that is a piece that we've been working on. Certainly there's always room to improve there, something as we'll continue to work on this year. I think, in fact, even that position we're talking about kind of falls into that objective of trying to bring a little bit more future planning into some of our management decisions. Continue to attract and hire positive, forward-thinking, experienced, and skilled staff, and connect efficient service with effective delivery tools and methods are the other objectives there. Comments, questions, or thoughts on any of those? Are those in line with where we want to be moving forward?
Well, on page 5, it talks about things that were accomplished in 2018, and under this one, it does talk about the performance-based policies for staff and operations of Stillwater Regional Airport, and so we have done some of those, and I think I hope we can keep the momentum going, because I think inspired management, I'm with Vice Mayor Darlington, that it's an important one to me as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think, too, building in some of those systems and processes, I know you talked about that, Mayor, even in your State of the City address, just kind of making sure that we've got kind of a robust and rigorous process as we're approaching from a management perspective. It just helps ensure, right? I mean, there's new council people, and we're making decisions that sometimes, go forward 10 years, and making sure that we have systems and processes in place that help us have institutional knowledge, that help us understand why decisions were made, previously, that help us revisit those decisions in a systematic way, so that it's, again, not that kind of reactive, we have to revisit this situation or we have to revisit this decision, but it's time to revisit this, and maybe it's a quick, we're doing great, or maybe it's a little deeper, maybe we need to figure something new out because, time has passed or the situation has evolved or changed. I think, to me, that helps. Maybe that's a legacy to a future council, but it helps everybody, I think.
Yeah, so things like the reserve policies that we're working toward, I think that is definitely something we want to continue to push for in the coming year from a staff perspective and an organization perspective, is to have more of those, like you said, sort of the institutional knowledge that we have, not only what we do, why we do it, and how we sort of see it moving forward. So we will certainly want to continue that.
In general, I was particularly happy to see the sample performance measures for each strategic priority and objective. It says sample performance measure. And we talked about this last year when this book came out, that we would really wanted to see performance measures for everything. And I know that's a lot of work. But I'm just looking at objective 2.2 on page 18, the number of internal promotions. I'm not exactly sure how that goes with objective 2, because that's about attracting and hiring forward-thinking, experienced, skilled staff. I don't know. It just, I understand they're samples, but I would love to see more development of those.
Okay.
I think that's such an opportunity too, as we look at performance measures, there can be, that can be kind of how do we measure success on kind of both sides, right? So how are we measuring success internally as a city, but also how is that success being measured by residents in the community and there's the community at large? I think there's opportunities to really embrace that idea of performance measurement to make sure it's kind of translates not only to the job we're doing internally, but how people think we're doing externally as well.
Yeah, and Sherry mentioned before the citizen satisfaction survey that we did a year or two ago.
I think it was 2017, is that right?
It was.
What is I feel like we've talked about sort of a follow-up schedule for those, and I don't remember what the follow-up schedule is. I don't know if you do.
Something that you guys would decide. Most cities, you will have a group of cities that do them every year. You have also cities that do it every other year, and then there's kind of a jump that where it's a lot of times it's 3 to 5 years. So it really comes down to how often you want to do them. I think we were initially thinking every 5 years, but that is open to discussion. We just need to budget for it and have a company redo it.
Is that something that can also, the flash vote?
Yeah. The flash vote's really more for, so it'll be 5 questions.
Okay.
So it'll be really short, something that people can do very quickly on their phone or by a phone call. But those would be for like very specific issues. You would like to know what people think about X, Y, or Z, and it's kind of a quick taking, but the numbers should be really solid.
Okay.
Whereas the citizen satisfaction is, like 40 questions, kind of broad, and but it really kind of depends on direction, how often you would like to see that done.
Is the satisfaction survey, is it typically, I imagine, do we kind of use similar questions so that we can measure?
It'd be, the majority of them will be the same. So the questions that we had on the last one, we looked at a lot of surveys. We took advice from the company that we hired that does that. And the majority of the questions will be the same. I think toward the end, there's like 5 questions that you could kind of rotate through and get some very specific things that you're interested in. I think the last time, one of the variable ones was what would you support for a bond issue? And so there was a list of possible options of what people said that they would consider. You might not run that question again, so you could put something else in its place. But it's really, I think it depends on you how often you would like to see that formal survey. 3 to 5.
I wonder though if you could take a piece of the overall citizen satisfaction and drill down further and flash vote.
Yes,
potentially as a way to
pick,
measure more specifically.
But yeah, you could pick a subject or a topic that you really wanted more about. That would be very suitable for that flash vote.
Yeah, that might be and not necessarily repeating the whole survey every year, but maybe picking one of the subsets or something and saying, well, we've spent a lot of time with public engagement this year, so maybe we just do a follow-up survey just on those pieces and see how that's moved the needle.
The other thing you can do with the flash vote is that you could do a survey at the beginning of an issue. Like, we're thinking about doing X, Y, or Z, what do you think? And everybody's like, no, I don't like it, or, we don't know anything about it. Then you do your public education component and then run that survey again and see if you had an impact. So that would be another way you could run it.
Okay. Okay, thank you. We probably will only ask you up here 3 or 4 more times.
I think one of the things that flash vote would be good for, in the citizen survey, I believe the worst rating that we received was understanding the budget. We've worked really hard, and it's a boring, to most people, subject. We've appeared in front of a lot of community groups, and that may be something we could say, is there a better understanding at this point?
Yeah. Yeah, it would be nice to be able to get a little bit quicker feedback on whether some of those efforts are having the impact that we want them to have, and if they're not, we can then maybe try something different. If they are, we know. I mean, it would be good to have some more immediate feedback on how effective some of those efforts have been. So that may be I guess, under inspired management or maybe civic engagement somewhere, that maybe a development of a little bit more detailed regular survey sort of methodology or performance review for how we're doing from the community standpoint would be something we might want to try to add in here. Someone out there's taking notes on this, right?
Yes.
Okay, other strategic priorities, other comments on any of these from a specific standpoint? I don't know if you guys want to just go in order through them and go over all the objectives, or if you have big picture stuff you'd prefer to do. I'm just going to go through them.
Go through it. Great.
Do it.
So we've kind of covered 2 and 6, so I'll go back to 1, effective services and accountable government. And just the major objectives there: continue to be accountable, ethical, and responsible local government. That's pretty vague and general, and hopefully that's true. Continue to align revenues and expenditures while maintaining appropriate reserve levels, and connect the standards of excellence to all aspects of city government. Comments or questions or thoughts about any of those?
I mean, how do you say anything about that? I mean, that's just the way it is.
I mean, it's sort of the baseline
Yeah.
expectation, right? I do like the sample performance measurement here, just in terms of council advisory board members who have completed legal and ethics training. I mean, and I think I'd almost want to add, I would actually really like to see us, from a council perspective and, from some of our volunteer boards and advisory boards, and doing some more kind of continuing education stuff. There's a lot of
Absolutely.
of good seminars, just, whether they're actually, we just had a webinar that I'm not sure many of us got to attend, but I got the notes from it on Introduction to Government Accounting for Non-Accountants, which is really good information for all of us to have, since, again, we're not doing this as our full-time job. I think it would be really important if we set a goal to do a little bit more sort of targeted education around some of the issues that we deal with.
That is something too that I think came up in our joint meeting with the Planning Commission. I think that some of the planning commissioners had mentioned or requested a little more formal training for their position, whether that's through just some continuing education type seminars or webinars, or whether there's an actual formal education that staff can provide them or something. I think it's important, that's straight up volunteer time, and I can't imagine. I mean, I have some more sense maybe than the average person just because of my career, but I can't imagine being thrown some of the complicated, I mean, this is challenging stuff, and it's such a wide range of issues and topics that some of our advisory boards and even we as a council are addressing, that it covers multiple departments, it covers multiple ranges of expertise, so giving them the wherewithal and confidence to make some of the decisions that they're making, I think is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it would be great to even see for each of those boards, including the council, almost sort of a curriculum of, here's kind of an orientation stuff that a book you should read and a webinar you should watch, and that sort of stuff that kind of gives you the lay of the land and kind of gets you up to speed. That would be for new members appointed, but potentially also would be available to members of the public who are thinking, oh, I'm interested in being on the planning commission, and could actually even do that curriculum ahead of time and sort of say, I've kind of gotten myself up to speed on it. That would help us with the appointment process too. You kind of get a better sense of who's engaged and
Do we do much with ICMA?
I'm sorry?
Do we do much with ICMA?
I don't know what that means.
No.
It's a city management
Right.
association, but they do have a lot of
things.
resources, tons of literature, publications, a lot of kind of almost how-to publications or so you're a city councilor now kind of things, that might be helpful and beneficial. I don't know that we have, I want to say you have to have some sort of membership perhaps to access all of their information, but there is some that's publicly available.
Right, which is kind of pricey.
Yeah.
But we do have a full-time training person for city employees, and it would be a simple matter for her to investigate what's available for boards, these kinds of the kinds of things that you're talking about. And we have a hub on the website that is provided for employees. We could do the same thing, I believe, for any of those boards and provide that information through the web. The one thing I was thinking is that with a volunteer who probably also has a full-time job, it might be good to provide as much of that as possible through the web.
Yeah, self-directed in some level.
I
yeah.
agree.
Yep. Anything else on priority 1? Objective 2 on revenues and expenditures and maintaining appropriate reserve levels, I think our continuing work on the reserve policies will help there. And I think, potentially identifying some other policies around budget stuff that we've got purchasing policy and some of that stuff that we're still in process with will help continue to move that forward. All right. Anything else on 1? Strategic priority 3, safe community. Objective 3.1 is create proactive and preventative programs that focus on public safety. 3.2 is continue to focus on effective and timely response when an emergency or threat arises, and connect employees with training and best practices that promote a safe community.
I think on 3.2, the sample performance measure is track response times of police and fire departments and emergency life services. I mean, that's the most feedback I get on safety.
And that's very simple to do through CAD system that we have. And another thing that probably would be surprising to hear as a performance measure would be the number of calls for service a year that are answered by our public safety
Right.
people. 45,000 a year is what we about hit, and that's almost one for every occupant at Stillwater. Pretty amazing number.
This is one of those areas where you see, I think we're starting to see a lot of more municipalities sort of in the data they make available publicly
Right.
to, in dashboards on their website, that kind of have fairly up-to-date public safety response times and calls and that sort of thing, where people can kind of get a more real-time view of how much our police and fire and emergency responders and that sort of thing are dealing with. And I wonder if that's something we could, certainly the response times would be a piece of that, the calls, looking into a more sort of comprehensive reporting, data delivery around public safety, I think would help people have a better understanding of what of what those folks deal with.
And you could do layer after layer of, how many calls are domestic violence, how many are mental health related, how many hospitalizations result, or, how many miles traveled of transporting. And I think, to me, that's almost in the sense of, if our system would change in the future, it would help prepare the community for why a big change might happen.
I think it also helps us as a community and as a council and as staff prioritize too. I mean, I think it helps when you have that data and you're making decisions based on data and that education. I mean, getting that kind of information and data and then sitting down and balancing act, you might have a different view of how you allocate dollars, we might have a different view with some of that data in mind. I think it's important information to put out there so that people know. I know that's something we've kind of talked about, I feel like, a little bit this year, is just people understanding how far their dollars go and what their dollars are spent on.
Well, in a sense, we're doing some visioning and some forward thinking in that. By having that information, it allows us to make decisions that need to happen. It's not a surprise to anyone because the information's out there.
Right.
And everyone's had a chance to look at it. So I think, in a sense, small steps by Mayor Donington, but we are doing a little bit of that visioning and forward thinking and having this discussion. So.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead.
All those things are easily done because we provide reports on a monthly basis. Fire department, police department do reports on a monthly basis that show what those calls are.
Yeah, I mean, it's data we collect now, I'm sure.
It is, and
just a matter of how we might deliver that out.
Also collect response times, and based on the priority of the call, our gold standard is 5 minutes, and generally we beat that. So,
I think the challenge in this day and age is presenting it in a way that's captured quickly by the casual viewer, and color and graphs and all kinds of things, not just a list of 25 this and 40 that, but something visual.
Generally by the 15th of the month, they're done for the previous month. So it would be a challenge putting it in graphic content.
Well, maybe we can just start with a list.
Well, and these are, again, this is a strategic priority for the year, something not necessarily that's got to go up on the website tomorrow, but something that we should be working towards, I think, in terms of, because so much of what I hear from a public safety perspective is anecdotal, and it's one event, this one thing happened this one time, and you sort of go, okay, well, I don't know how that fits into the bigger picture. Is that, how big of an outlier is it? How, and not having, we have all that information, but being able for somebody to say, oh, well, it actually fits into this bigger picture pretty clearly. So just having that out there, I think, would help folks not get bogged down in the individual instances.
And I need to give a shout out too as we talk about safe communities. I think Class 4 of the Citizens Academy is starting tomorrow evening, and I am just so proud that the police department has taken that effort to engage our citizens in being a part of that academy. I think that it speaks volumes. I think everyone that has taken that class walks away with a different perspective, and I think that's pretty much, what happens. I think, like you said, Mayor, you have an incident that happens and it becomes in your mind that that's the way it is. Well, there's always two sides to every story, and as we go through something like this, it really does engage the community to understand what it's like to be on the law enforcement side of things and decisions they have to make. And it's not about being perfect human beings, it's just about what happens when you're in that scenario. So excited that Class 4 is starting, and hope that every citizen who's even remotely interested in learning about what it is like to be a part of our law enforcement, it's a great academy to go through.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. As part of that larger community outreach program that the police department does, part of the larger outreach that all of our public safety folks do, I know the National Night Out thing that we've done with the fire department out there and the sheriffs, and and giving, the more opportunities we give people to sort of see why things happen the way they do, what the sort of procedures are, and all that sort of thing, the better it is.
An environment where it's safe to ask questions.
Yes.
And have dialogue and conversation about things that we wouldn't have otherwise because of where we're at. So it's a good thing.
That just on objective 3.1, to expand on that idea of, just writing the police department's community outreach program. Well, what, that's Night Out. We had 25 people there this year. We want to have 50 people there next year. How do we, the police academy, how do we advertise that so that we have, a wait list to be there or something? Because just reading community outreach program does not give the full picture of what our safety services do. You know, all the things that the fire department does, with grade schools and
The
car
trucks
seats.
out and car seats.
Smoke detectors and,
And I really like what you said, Will, about we have the data, and if we get it out, it just makes everything make more sense.
Okay. Objective 4, strategic priority 4, place and mobility, to develop a strong sense of place that recognizes the interconnectedness of people, buildings, and public systems, such as transportation, utilities, and parks that best serve the needs of the public. Objective 4.1 is create forward-thinking policies and practices that result in developing and maintaining our infrastructure integrity. 4.2 is continuing practices that provide a well-planned and highly reliable public utility and infrastructure system that serves the needs of the public. And 4.3 is connect the need for well-managed land use and development practices with the needs of citizens, businesses, students, and visitors. There's a lot packed into these 3 objectives.
Yeah. You just said a mouthful.
4.1, I think, deals mainly with sort of bigger picture infrastructure, includes strategies around infrastructure master plans, implementing leading edge technologies, maintaining existing infrastructure assets and plan for future growth. I know we have a few things we've talked about over the year that are related to this. We're doing infrastructure inventories around some of our stormwater stuff. We're working on stormwater master planning. We're doing, the broadband feasibility study. Yeah, some of those
Pavement
things.
management.
The pavement management plan and continuing there. We just continue to gather data. That's another one of those places where we do have a lot of data about streets, about infrastructure, about maintenance schedules and all that sort of thing that, I think we should look into how we can make that data available to people. And like you said, Pat, I mean, the way it's presented, being in a format that's somewhat easily digested, right? Instead of, a spreadsheet with a list of numbers, but having some way of presenting some of that data so people have a better sense, of what the status of our infrastructure is. The other thing I was thinking was the automation project and the digital meters and that sort of thing on the utility side. That's going to create tons and tons of data around, meters and that sort of thing, and aggregating that data and giving people an opportunity to see it. I just, we're seeing that more and more especially in the municipal space with cities putting out, like collect all this data, and we just kind of want to give it to people and say, okay, listen, here's all the stuff that's going on. You have the same information that we have. We're presenting it to you in a way that makes sense and gives you some insight into how things work, so you can provide better input back to us.
Well, with the AMR, we can actually provide educational piece to our citizens to say, here's how you analyze this data, here's what it's telling you, and you can cut your utility use by a variety of methods.
Yeah.
So
You can see your peak times, and you can say, when to schedule some of those tasks.
I think,
I'm
go ahead.
sorry.
No.
I think the only thing that I would add to this, or I don't know, I guess I would like the word there more solidly. I think it's so important when we're planning that we are also putting implementation into those plans. Plans that just have really good data and really good ideas but have no implementation is so very challenging to address over time in particular, especially, if a plan was put in place several years ago, that conversation was really rigorous and robust at the time, and then, 2 years later you're trying to implement that, but if you don't have implementation strategies in your plans, it makes it really challenging to get back into that conversation. So I don't know if that's in there somewhere, and maybe we don't want to see plans come across that don't have implementation included as a part of them. That has to be part of our planning process. And it's fluid, and implementation might change over those few years, but having some direction on implementation, whether it's where we find the finances to do those things, or what departments need to get together to make those things happen, or what financing needs to come into that picture. I think it's just so very important. It's great to gather data on stormwater and to look at our stormwater infrastructure, and we could say where we need it, and we could say where it's failing, but if we don't have a plan in place, an implementation plan in place, it's just going to fall flat.
Well, it falls flat, and then it goes to civic engagement, that then the community doesn't have confidence that, we're just not up here talking about it all the time. That there are certain things that we've put in place to try and implement. If it's successful, great. If it fails, okay, let's try again, but at least there's some effort in, like you said, trying to implement something.
It's kind of that final task.
Right.
Planning is hard work, but it's the implementation piece
Implementation's
that's really challenging.
And having some guidelines and some things that help us and future councils to do that, I think is very important. And staff.
Seems like it easily fits into one of the strategies under Objective 4.1.
It's kind of what I was thinking too.
Yeah. Is this document, this document would be for public people to look at, anybody to look at.
Be on the website.
Yeah, so on, sample performance measure for 4.1, maintain current level of review for master plans. Well, that doesn't tell me anything about the current level, nor does it tell me what master plans we have. So, what's the current level? And how many master plans do we have? What's a master plan? I'm not asking you to answer that, but this does not tell me anything.
Okay. It's easily added.
Just to follow up on that implementation, I think you're right. 4.1.1, develop and or update infrastructure master plans with detailed implementation strategies. Yeah, I think that's a good point. We do have a history of planning without how it's actually going to happen. Anything else on priority 4? I'll ask and answer that question. 4.3, connect the need for well-managed land use and development practices with the needs of citizens, business visitors, and students. We spent quite a bit of time this last year or so on some land use planning that maybe failed for partly a lack of implementation, partly a lack of good planning all around, probably. A lot of different reasons. We've talked a lot about the 12th Street issue and that neighborhood plan and kind of where that goes. I think that sort of falls squarely in this objective. And we've talked about some of those smaller neighborhood plans and taking some of those smaller chunks and try to do that as we go forward. I think that I was just looking at these strategies. Maybe one of these needs to really say, develop a repeatable process for neighborhood land use planning,
whatever.
or
We want to
something along those lines.
call it corridor.
Because we really would like to see that, to see some significant progress on how we do those plans.
I agree. I think it recognizes the unique qualities and character of those districts within our community that, the people there, the land use there, for all different reasons, they kind of come to the process with a unique set of needs and a unique, opportunity for growth or maintenance and all of those things. I think it's a really good goal, I think, to include that as a part of that particular objective.
And allows for everyone to understand what the process is, and there's no surprises and no trying to guess what, there's
Other thoughts on strategic priority number 4? All right, strategic priority number 5, quality of life. The purpose is to develop partnerships, create high quality of life with equal access to services and amenities, strong and connected neighborhoods, and a healthy economy and business atmosphere that align with community values. Objective 1 here, create an environment that fosters innovative and entrepreneurial business community. 2 is continue to preserve livability in Stillwater's strong and distinctive neighborhoods. And 3 is connect citizens with diverse opportunities for artistic, historic, wellness, education, cultural, and recreational pursuits. Also lots of stuff here.
Every one of them does.
Some of this, some overlap with what we were just talking about in place of mobility in terms of neighborhood planning. Other questions or thoughts or comments about number 5?
I think it's been neat to see some of the partnerships that have been created as I look at 5.1 between the city, between Oklahoma State University and Meridian Technology Center as far as trying to foster the entrepreneurial and celebrating those individuals and companies that are doing something new in Stillwater and kind of providing a forum for them to get together and gather and talk about what's worked well and what hasn't worked well. And so I think there is a spirit of being innovative and entrepreneurial, and it's been neat to see that spread into entities that normally maybe do the same thing but have worked in silos. So it's been neat to see them kind of come together and get that going. And so I hope that just keeps the momentum going and provides for that. So I think that's a good win.
It absolutely is, and it's the more you sort of look at Stillwater and its business community, the more you recognize, I think, that a number of the job creators, a number of the people who work in Stillwater, I mean, outside of the university and sort of the city and the 3 or 4 biggest employers, a lot of those are homegrown companies. There's a lot of businesses that started here, entrepreneurs that came here, and that the job base of people who work at a company that started in Stillwater is not something that we necessarily attracted from outside. I mean, we certainly want to do that. One of these performance measures around requests for proposals that the chamber responds to, when somebody's looking for a site, we certainly want to sell Stillwater as a possibility for that. But to me, it seems like there's just as many, or if not more, people who work for places that started and grew here and didn't relocate here from somewhere else or came here to open their second office. And so, some of those performance measures around, jobs created at homegrown companies and startups from Stillwater, I think is something we really need to drive for, because those are the places that feel connected here, that aren't going to take those jobs and move them back to Minnesota or Wisconsin or wherever. It's I think should be a very big priority for us and in our partnership with the chamber and all those other folks in town to continue to build that. And there has been, like you said, a ton of work on that front from Meridian, from the chamber, from the university, and something that we as a city really need to get behind and help support.
Again, this is an area that some of our new engagement tools might be helpful. 5.1.1 says align strategies, programs, partnerships with workforce development goals to meet the needs of local employers. And if you could target local employers and ask them what they need, we could align our strategies, programs, and partnerships. Or call Meridian. They probably know. Somebody who has done that research. But we have to reach out to these people to know what they actually want for us to do anything as far as a strategy or performance measure.
I suppose, that's one of those instances where the data lies with somebody else. So we may need to, that might be part of that strategy is obtaining that data, because it's not going to be, we're not driving that data necessarily.
And for us and for them to understand, what actually could the city do for you? I mean, maybe there's nothing that we could do, but to be, and maybe there is, if we actually would know. But again, another place to begin a conversation.
There's a couple other things that I think fall under this priority that we probably need to put in here somewhere, and one of them maybe is a hybrid of priority 4 and 5, but kind of goes to our efforts at development, especially as related to the reinvestment plan, the core reinvestment plan that we implemented past this last summer, and are working towards implementing projects that will use some of that reinvestment incentive, the TIF financing and the other tools that are available there. I think we need some mention in 4 or 5 somewhere about having a strategic priority of, or maybe not at a priority level, but a strategy or an objective that says, to utilize those tools to continue our sort of outreach to developers. I think we need to do some more targeted marketing around our development incentives and towards our development goals for the year in Stillwater, and bring a bit more sense of urgency towards bring some of those developments in. So I'm not sure exactly where that falls.
It's kind of close, Will, to 5.1.3, if we split that into,
Yep.
split OSU out of that, market our competitive advantages and leverage our leverage to
Yeah.
attract additional investment.
And some of that just might be gathering all of that toolbox in
Yep.
one place and understanding what our toolbox actually consists of.
Yeah.
In terms of economic development incentives.
I've looked at recently the city of Oklahoma City, the city of Louisville, there's a couple other cities around town or around the country that have put out basically investment prospectuses.
Perspectives from opportunity zones.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen those.
That list available land, that list available incentives, that we've kind of actually done it a little bit on some case-by-case basis on different, opportunities here in Stillwater, but a bigger, more cohesive, more sort of broadly used prospectus around what's available in Stillwater would be, I think, pretty helpful for us to put in place this year. The other issue that probably falls under 5.3 is kind of listed separately on the agenda under public-private partnership review procedures. But a lot of these quality of life offerings, when we talk about historic, wellness, education, cultural, recreation, that sort of thing, are offered here through public-private partnerships that we have with SASA, through Lake McMurtry, through the Prairie Arts Center. And one of the things we've been working on and talking about around those partnerships is a more robust review, more robust communication, more sort of careful approach to how we do public-private partnerships. That includes what we do with the chamber. It includes the marketing with Visit Stillwater. And so we do, I think, need whether it's a separate, again, objective or part of one of these strategies that talks about investing this year in building that kind of process and procedure around how we deal with those partnerships. Someone else might need to explain that better, because I'm not, or take me to the next step there, because I'm not sure what the next step looks like there.
In terms of pulling it into the strategic?
Yeah, either where it goes in the strategic plan or kind of what we want to see in that what that strategy, how it needs to be framed. Like, is the strategy to build a review process? Is it to to do the reviews, to come up with a schedule for how often we do reviews? I guess probably all of that.
I think we need to do all of that. I mean, I think too, it might be important, and I don't know if now's the time and place, but I think it's important to kind of take a step back and think about what these partnerships, these public-private partnerships actually are, why we're doing them. As we look through our strategic priority 5, almost each one of those priorities starts with this discussion of partnerships. And so it's kind of a term that, it can mean a lot of different things, but specifically in a public-private partnership and some of the more, we have contractual relationships with private entities. And so I think kind of zooming out for a second and taking a look at why we would have started those. It's an opportunity for us as a city, it's an opportunity for private entities, an opportunity for our community to come together around specific services or specific needs in the community, kind of for a common goal, right? A lot of times we see them around recreation or something like that. So it should be this unifying, partnership. So I think it's important to kind of go back to that root of that. And it's also an opportunity for us to save money. Sometimes you can even earn money through those public-private partnerships as a city, to tap into the expertise of the private sector in terms of, their skill sets and what they can bring to the table that we may not be able to do as a city. A lot of times we can do that work more effectively outside of the confines of the city structure. And it helps make sure, right, we go into these partnerships because we want to kind of make sure that we're economically viable and we're vibrant and we have all the cultural, recreational facilities and opportunities that we as a community, come to expect. And we want to provide all those things with this high level of service that we as a community have also come to expect and want to provide as a city. So I think we need to go back and kind of remember why we started these to begin with. And then I think we also need to go back and kind of think about what is the framework of each of those? What do we really need to accomplish and how should we be looking at those? We've kind of started this conversation and I think we just kind of need to, we've talked about the need to develop this process. We've started that conversation. I think we need to finish it. I think we need to say what the process is going to be and what we want to get out of it. What does success look like on both sides of that, for the public part of it and the private part of it? What kinds of things do you need to include when you're putting that partnership together? What kind of communication needs to be there? All of those things, I think, are things that we need to talk about.
And understanding that putting that process in place and implementing it also allows for when things change, then once again, there's no surprises from either side, that there's, opportunity to realize that change has happened or things are, maybe not when the partnership first formed. And then being able to have that open dialogue with that partnership to say, okay, like you said, what is going to be successful as we move forward? What are some things that need to be done in order to keep doing what the intent originally was? And maybe the process may be different to make it look that way, but the goal is still ultimately the same. But sometimes you have to tweak that. And I think having that implementation and process in place would help alleviate a lot of confusion and frustration over.
If we have a schedule of how we evaluate and have a conversation with these partners, if it's scheduled, you can also adjust if your original plan changes.
Right.
And
it keeps a dialogue open, right? It's an intentional way of keeping a dialogue open. I think, when you have a public-private partnership, I think there's external customers, right, that benefit from that public-private partnership. That's kind of the intent. So those are kind of our customers, our external, kind of the outputs benefit them typically. But I think at the end of the day, it is also a contractual relationship between a public entity and a private entity, and that needs to be addressed as well. I think that's kind of maybe, that's what we can kind of address in our process piece anyway. We need to obviously make sure that that partnership is benefiting the customer or, citizens that are residents, that, users, that it's meant to, but we also need to make sure that we have the contractual relationship built in such a way that it's beneficial to both sides. I mean, truly, as a consultant, it goes both ways, right? It needs to benefit the city, but it also needs to be beneficial to the entity that's there. And if we don't ever go back and revisit it or talk about it, I think it's not to their benefit either. So again, going back to, we've started this idea of talking about process. I think that's a really important part. And, selecting appropriate partners is kind of number one, making sure that we've got folks that'll meet those contractual needs, and then also the customer needs clearly is extremely important.
So for what we've got there at 5.3.1 and strategy about continuing to develop community partnerships, I think just sort of broaden that in the sense of developing, defining, revising, and reevaluating the process around those community partnerships is kind of a general expansion of that strategy to
I wonder if it's an expansion of that strategy or if it's a sample performance measure for 5.3.1. We will examine the contracts for every public-private partnership. We will set up a schedule.
I think we need to put a procurement process in place. I don't think that the city should be in contractual agreements that don't have a reoccurring procurement process. I think that's just important.
It's kind of like the implementation piece of it.
Yeah, it's kind of like, how do you work through a relationship if you don't have something that is a reoccurring. And I don't think we should every year or anything like that. I just don't think, if we've got contracts, the folks that we have contracts with, they should know that this is a reoccurring procurement.
May I ask for some clarification there?
Yep.
I
think so, Norman.
I'm here a little puzzled. We renew those contracts once a year.
Yes.
And you're talking about a procurement process where there's an opportunity for others to become involved?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And again,
not necessarily on a yearly basis.
I don't think that needs to be a yearly basis. I think that actually would be really detrimental to these partnerships. But I think what's also detrimental to these partnerships is to not ever have the opportunity to go out for procurement. I think the conversation and the collaboration, I think there's I speak a little bit from, I'm a consultant, so I do this sort of kind of, but not in a public partnership way. It's just important to know that your relationships will be revisited. It's important on both sides.
And not just revisited from a, hey, is everything okay? Sure, okay, let's keep going. But a reevaluation of the needs, a reevaluation of the delivery.
Or even just an opportunity to say, I'm doing a great job for you. Yeah. Let me tell you about the great job I'm doing for you. Or I'm doing a great job for you, but I don't have enough money to do the great job for you that I want to do. Or I'm doing a great job for you and I could use a little more money and I could do an even better job for you. Or I feel like I'm not meeting your needs and goals and expectations here. Let's revisit that. I think all of those things, going both directions are really important in these partnerships to keep them the vibrant, kind of vital partnerships that we want them to be, serving our community in these really important capacities.
And I love that plan. But I see the strategy. The strategy's fine, 5.3.1, but it's the performance measures that can be more specific.
Sure.
These are great strategies, and they should continue. But we need some measures. We'll have by August, we'll have procurement plans for all public-private partnerships. And you may have this, we talked about this before, who's going to do it?
Norman.
Well, I know it's easy to just,
Well, if we could,
A little end by that one.
are we talking about reviewing one a year, or, because
Yeah.
we need a little guidance on that. I can tell you that since this discussion has come to the fore in the last year or two, that we have one that's come to us that says, we're going to present you, I don't want to ruin the surprise, but we're going to present you a plan on becoming completely financially independent within 3 years. To review that plan and look at it and say, well, it looks like you can, they probably ought to be given a chance to do that, because it's a unit of government that used to cost the city a lot of money.
Yeah, I don't think, at least what I'm envisioning here is something that is a rotating basis of different partnerships at different times. It's not something that happens, every 3 years. Everybody's not up at the same time, but
Right.
something where,
Staggered.
we've got a staggered approach, and we're kind of continually doing that, but continually doing it on a rotating basis for those different things. And also, there may be other opportunities the city's not currently doing with public-private partnerships that we could be doing with public-private partnerships. And so that, how do we start a new one if we want to? How do we wind one up if we decide it's not really the right approach?
So much on the horizon as you look across the country, people using public-private partnerships. The way we currently use them is it's just tip of the iceberg, I think. There's, on much larger scales, we're seeing transportation projects at statewide levels happening with public-private partnerships. You can see a whole, economic development partnerships and projects being built with public-private partnerships in mind. So they can get much more sophisticated and complicated with a lot more higher stakes than even we're kind of seeing in our community right now. So again, it goes back to this, conversation that we've started about process and making sure that we have a strong process in place so that if somebody does come and want to build a project with some sort of public-private partnership, that we have the ability to handle that and manage that well and successfully.
Yep, a couple of years ago, and you are correct, that the city can save money in partnering with people. We did a private thing with a water line, and if I recall, the savings, and it's the state laws, it's the bidding, it's all kinds of things that enter into this. It's not same engineering, same pipe that was put in the ground, same everything, and it saved the city $40,000 to $60,000 on the exact same project because a private entity did it.
Well, it's why we do those things. It really is, and and to tap the expertise of the private sector.
Yeah.
And the energy and the commitment that they have to these kind of niche services that would be hard for us to support internally. There's good reason. We just need to make sure that I think we're protecting both sides of that. So I think. As I've, sat and listened and done some reading and kind of looked at some of that stuff, I came across an article the other day that had a couple of points. I'm going to read them, not wholly, but some of them to you it was advice for public-private partnerships. The first one was select appropriate partners. I think we've kind of talked about that, just making sure we've got customer service partners, but also folks that are committed to the contractual relationship with the city. Conduct thorough economic impact studies that determine the risks and rewards of the partnership. What does success look like for both sides? Develop long-range plans. So maybe that one that's got some plans for being independent and successful there. I think that's pretty cool. Secure the commitment of city leaders and staff who can take on leadership roles. Ensure that both the public and private sectors remain actively involved. I think that's key, making sure both sides are talking and coming to the table. And communicate with all those affected by the partnership. So hopefully we're doing a little bit of that now, but I thought those were really kind of topical to our whole conversation about process for these.
We'll draft up a plan.
Great. That'll be performance measure.
Yes.
Just since we're on that page, how are we on our special event coordination?
It's on the web. You have one person to deal with. It seems to be working fine. I will tell you that the number of complaints have dropped to very few.
Good.
When you have one person you can go to and they know absolutely everything they need to do, it makes a tremendous difference rather than getting shipped around to different places.
Good.
Okay, anything else on strategic priority number 5? We covered priority number 6 first, but we could jump back through there. I'll just read through it real quick. Civic engagement, encourage participation and understanding of government through outreach and inclusiveness initiatives that inspire trust and confidence in local government. Objective 1 was create an environment where people can find or share the right information at the right time. I think we're seeing a lot of that in this discussion around data and also in the tools that we've been implementing recently. Objective 2, continue to provide public with balanced, objective news and information to assist them in understanding problems, issues, and opportunities or solutions. Again, certainly the output from our marketing, public relations, public information folks this year has been, I think, has definitely gone up in both number and quality. I think there's a lot of great information out there, whether it's what's coming up in meetings, the videos around different parts of the city and how they work, the podcasts. We're, I think making a lot of progress there. But like we've said on some of these, it's our responsibility to make sure we're going where people are and getting them information they need. And then objective 3, connect the public with opportunities to be involved in feedback process at the appropriate level, which is also part of what we already talked about. So any other comments or questions on priority 6?
Well, again, just, if this were just on the website the way it is, the performance measures don't measure anything. I mean, we need the data, number of engagements on social media platforms, or number of new and returning website users. How many do we have now? I mean, how much do we want to increase by next year? What's a reasonable level of increase?
Yeah, and
data right now.
Yeah, I assume that that's sort of saying this is something, the data we could put up to measure this, and then when this is on the web, it will actually have, we had X number of engagements last month and the month before and that sort of thing. So, but I think this is a good exercise for all of us and really anybody else in the community who's looking at this this plan, these sample performance measures, and coming up with ideas of other things we could track, because really, kind of going back to that discussion of data, if you care about public safety in Stillwater, what is the information you'd like to see that helps you decide whether we're doing a good job at it or not? If you care about development and neighborhoods and that sort of thing, what are the performance measures that you want us to keep track of, so we can help figure out if we are doing a good job with it or not? I mean, that is, I think, an excellent opportunity for feedback for anybody in town around a strategic plan. What information can we give you to let you know whether we're doing a good job or not at these initiatives? So those definitely do need to be expanded and filled out, and more of them added, and some of those numbers filled in, so that we can track well whether we're
Mayor's giving out homework for everybody.
I got a lot more that you could do.
I was listening to NPR the other day, and it was a long discussion about how participation in government at all levels, it's amazing how shocking. We talk about 1%, and I think we're talking about they're talking about economic indicators, the 1%ers. But truly in government, it's the 1%ers of people that participate. and kind of make their voice known, do the mayor's homework. It's so discouraging sometimes that we don't have more participation and people that are interested when we're kind of making the tough decisions and engaging and letting us know what's important to them. So yeah, I would encourage them to do your homework.
All right, that takes us through the strategic priorities. Anything else in the draft plan that you all would like to discuss at this point? I'm not going to sit here and beg you.
Nope, I'll look forward to see those expanded performance measures.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of these comments and questions around some changes to these objectives and strategies, some new ones and some alterations, and then, yeah, absolutely, the expanded performance measures and what we can do to keep track would be great to see. Anything else on this discussion, Council?
I guess just to get a sense of how you all are thinking about performance measures. Is it just data? Is it dates? Is it who does it?
I mean, to me, a performance measure needs to be measurable. So maybe part of it includes getting data, but then it seems to me there'd be some sort of action with that data, or some sort of other determining. I don't know if a performance measure would just be getting the data on the website per se, right?
Well, I mean, I guess it really depends on the strategy, I think. I mean,
Might be unique to each one.
yeah, I mean, some of them are just going to be, when it comes to response times or calls.
Right,
That's sort of numbers. When we talk about current level of review for master plans, that would be more of a master plan review, every X number of years, or, there's some more dates to some of those, so I think it will depend a bit on the specific measure we're talking about, whether it's just a number or whether it's a date or whether it's a deadline.
Okay, I'll even a number. I mean, if you had response times and you noticed that in one part of the city they were too long, I mean, the performance measure would be by next year
Improve.
it
Yeah.
will improve. So it does matter what the numbers are.
Sure.
But I think that a performance measure should have some, I mean, we're trying to get better.
Yeah. Yes, and
Something that would be measurable against next year, right? That's
Yeah,
how
part of
we
this
might test it. That'd be your test
Yeah.
for it. Is it something that we could compare to next year's?
Well, and I know that this example may not be the greatest, but we gave you, and I don't recall the number, but how many miles of mowing we did, and we have a ton of data. If we just know what it is that people are interested in, we'll use. As I said, there's in both public safety units, there is reporting requirements that breaks that data down into little bitty bites that someone might find interesting. So we have a plethora of that kind of thing that we can say, this year we answered 44,000 calls for service. The number one call was, we'd like to see that decrease, because obviously the one business that I think that we're in, that everybody'd like to see us get put out of is law enforcement. If we didn't need that, it'd be great. But probably a pipe dream. But we have all kinds of comparative data that we can provide.
Well, I think, we can be flooded with data and for no reason.
Sure.
And so we have to think of, why do we collect it? Why do we print it? 44,000 calls doesn't mean a thing to me for a city. I don't know how many, other 50,000 people cities, or how many other university cities have 44,000 calls or have 200,000 calls. I mean, are we doing great? Are we not doing great? How do we compare to comparable cities? Data just for data is not helpful.
sure. Yeah, I think that's true. I think from the standpoint of some of this, though, it's data that we're not currently publishing.
Right.
And so part of it is establishing baselines and saying, okay, here's the availability of some data. And then that gives us a baseline to be able to say, okay, did we improve on that this year? How does it compare to X? Getting that data out there first gives us the sort of palette to then go, okay, well, wait a second, what does this mean? And that's something I think we can move forward with as we get those tools out to people. We'll get more comments and questions about, okay, yeah, 44,000, but how many did Lawrence, Kansas have? You know, I mean, whatever. So it's part of that process for sure.
And it also, and I know I'm getting over a cold, but it also bodes well for our forward thinking. I mean, to have this information, I mean, we can't just say, oh, we want to be visioning. Well, what are we visioning on? What is, I mean, I think we need to have the data. We need to have these things in order to figure out exactly and prioritize what it is we want to think in moving forward. So, in essence, we're getting there.
Anything else? Or is there a motion to adjourn?
You want to keep talking?
I'm not putting words in your mouth. I just want to know what you guys want to do. I think I heard a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn the city council meeting. Please vote.
I don't even know if mine went.
With a vote of 4-0, we are now adjourned. Thank you all.